Hello, I'm Jeff Mearns, and I have the good fortune to serve as the president here at Ball State University. And it's my pleasure and my privilege to welcome you to this conversation. This is a conversation that we're going to have about our university's commitment to inclusive excellence. Inclusiveness is one of the enduring values that guides our university to a bright future. We define inclusiveness as a commitment to respect and embrace equity, inclusion, and diversity in people, ideas, and opinions. And at our university, we continue to nurture a community that respects all people, that fosters an ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And today I've invited three of our graduates and our Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence to join me for this conversation, to talk about the progress we've made in the past and the work that we still have to do to reach this ambitious goal. So as I begin, I'm going to introduce our guests who are with me today. First is Teresa Jeter. Teresa is a graduate of Ball State University. She earned her master's degree in urban and regional planning in 1995. She's a member of our Alumni Council. She's president of our Black Alumni Constituent Society. She just recently won the Volunteer of the Year Award from the Alumni Council. And a little over a year ago, she joined our faculty in the College of Architecture and Planning. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you.
Also, we have Renee Conley, who is a Ball State graduate. She received her bachelor's in accounting in 1980 and her MBA in 1982. She had a distinguished career in the energy business. She was the Executive Vice President of Human Resources and the Chief Diversity Officer at the Entergy Corporation. And she now serves on our Board of Trustees, and she is actually the chair of our Board of Trustees. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you.
Jonathan Scott is also a Ball State graduate. He works at Eli Lilly in corporate affairs and communications. He earned a bachelor's degree in journalism in 2005, also serves on our Ball State Alumni Council, and the Indy Rainbow Chamber of Commerce named Jonathan one of the business leaders of the year in just this year in 2020. Welcome, Jonathan. And then Marsha McGriff. Marsha is our Associate Vice President in the Office of Inclusive Excellence. She joined the university in May of 2019 after a distinguished career at Indiana University. We're glad to have you with us, Marsha. So I want to begin, Teresa, if I can begin by asking you a question, if I may. As I mentioned, you attended Ball State as an undergraduate student and you received your master's degree here. So tell me a little bit about why you chose to come to Ball State, first as an undergraduate student and then for your master's degree, and what your experience like was as a student at Ball State.
Okay. Ball State University, the greatest university in my backyard, right? Why would I not want to attend Ball State? I started here as an undergraduate and kind of lost focus a little bit and traveled a little bit and came back after I earned my undergraduate degree elsewhere. And I received my master's, like you said, in the College of Urban and Regional Planning, a great program that gave me a great start. And I was able to do a number of things that I continue to give back because of the Master's in Urban and Regional Planning. So I love the education that Ball State gave me, and that is continuing to certainly allow me to engage with communities and students. And so that's my passion. And so I love what the university offered me, and it continues to give back as I give back.
Right. And you rejoined the university, I guess about a year and a half ago, as a faculty member in the College of Architecture and Planning.
Yes.
Why did you decide to come back, and how's that been like coming back home?
I love it. I mean, I hang around with young people, so I feel younger every day. I was ending a career, actually, a 20-year career with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I was approached by the chairperson, Scott Truex, of the Urban Planning Department. And he didn't know I was getting ready to retire. So I had all these plans, what I was going to do. But he reached out to me. So he called me and said, Teresa, let's have lunch. I said, sure. So we met. He said, listen, I want you to teach at the university. I said, really? Why? Why do you want me to teach? He said, well, you were a great student. And he said, you really excelled well in the urban planning program. So I know that you have a lot to offer the students, and they can learn a lot from you. I said, so you didn't have to tell me anything past that. So it's been great. He was one of my instructors when I went in the urban planning department, and he certainly stayed true to his word because he's very passionate about diversity. So he reached out to me when he could have certainly contacted a number of worthy people that could have taught. But he reached out to me, so I'm happy that he did.
Yeah. So you have some perspective of what it was like to be a student here in the 1990s and now back as a faculty member. How has the experience, how has the climate or the culture on campus changed? Has it changed in those 20 or 25 years?
It definitely has changed. The first day of class in the urban planning program, I was the only female in a group of 8 guys. I said, oh God, am I in the right place? And I said to myself, yes, I think I am. It was very enriching. I learned a lot, but I noticed that there weren't any faculty of color. There weren't any students of color except myself. I'm comfortable in those environments because I grew up in those environments, certainly in my educational pursuit here at Ball State. So I didn't see it being something that was terrible, but I think we can do a little bit better than that. So over the years, I have seen a lot of improvement, and certainly as a part of the President's Advisory Council on Inclusive Excellence, that I have an opportunity to even make it greater or help in that capacity, my contribution. So thank you for inviting me to serve on that council. I think that I've seen a lot of improvement. I'm very happy that the benevolence pledge is not just a pledge for students to say as they come here, but it is a pledge that this institution certainly has embraced. The faculty has embraced it, the students have embraced it as well. And so that is a major piece of the difference that I see happening with the Ball State University, because it's not just a pledge, but people have embraced it. It means something. It's just not a pledge because it's a nice pledge to have, and so it's been. I have seen the growth, and I have seen the compassion from the dean, from the chair, from the students, from the staff. It's all around us, and so we can't help but embrace it, and so that's the big difference that I see.
Great. Well, thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
So, Renee, you grew up here in Muncie.
I did.
You went to Burris, then attended Ball State. So what was it like to stay home, and what was it like on campus when you were here as an undergraduate student and as a graduate student?
Well, it's, having grown up in Muncie, and as Teresa said, Ball State's in your backyard, so that was a pretty easy choice my mom was a non-traditional student. She started going to school when I was 10 and she graduated the year before I graduated, so she's like, I got to beat you out of college. But I grew up on Nichols and walked to school. Burris was the neighborhood school then. It wasn't like it is set up now. And I was a commuter student, so I had a little different experience than the traditional come and stay in a dorm. And I worked full-time and went to school full-time, so I didn't have a huge social life when I was going to school here. But I loved my classes, and I loved the education, and I love my professors. I talk about them still today. Dr. Parkinson was a huge impact on me and my confidence and my ability to pursue my career and excel. I mean, they told me that. They had confidence in me, which built confidence in myself. And I just think it was a great education. And when I come back to campus, and of course I'm a lot here now. My mom still lives here, and it's a great combination of coming to campus and visiting my mom. But the growth and just the beauty of the campus, and just I think the school's just come so far in all the years.
Yeah, and so your mother, Vivian Conley, mother-in-law, Vivian Conley, was a historic figure here in Muncie, and also somebody quite memorable here at Ball State. Tell us about Ms. Conley.
Yeah, I was, as you mentioned her name, I think how proud she would be that we're having this here today, and how she would have loved to have been part of it. She was an amazing woman. And she really understood what we're talking about, and that was building relationships with different people and understanding that that's how you move things forward. She didn't have a college degree, and a high school degree. She got her GED when she was like in her 50s and decided that she wanted to pursue her college education. She came to Ball State as a non-traditional student, understood how difficult it was to be a black woman in her 50s trying to get a degree at Ball State. So she established at Ball State a non-traditional student program and said, I'm not the only one. It's hard to maneuver through Ball State. And at the same time, she realized how difficult it was to get black kids from Muncie into Ball State. And so she worked really hard to help kids maneuver through the process of getting into school, staying in school. And that was what she did in her 60s. Before that, she has a whole lot of work that she did on civil rights movements in the community. And she was amazing. And my children are interracial, and she was just and it makes me choke up because she was such an influence on them. She would tell them when they were little, and they're 41 and 36 now. So she'd say, God chose you to be the bridge. And that was, and they took that to heart. They're like, you're going to understand both sides and see the difference in cultures. And they both have pursued that as adults. My daughter is chief diversity officer where she works, and my son works with at-risk kids. So they both have pursued that. When she passed, the headline was, Muncie's Mother Teresa passes, because she did so much for this community. And there were hundreds of kids that said, I wouldn't have gone to college if it hadn't been for Vivian Conley. So she was amazing, and I'm just fortunate to have had her in my life.
I was one of those kids. She grabbed my hand, my mother's hand. She dragged us up to the administration building and told the financial aid person to get her in. She probably needs some money, help her out, and then we went back out the door. So yeah. Yes, we did call her Mother Teresa.
Yeah, she was amazing.
She literally built a bridge between and a pathway for other students to come to Ball State, that bridge that we continue to build between the university and the community.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, let me ask you a question. You, as I mentioned, you graduated in 2005, and I understand that you came out to your friends and your family after you graduated. What was it like? What was your experience like on campus?
Yeah, I did come out after graduating, and different from what happens for a lot of people now who come out of the closet, I guess would be the full term for a lot of cases. But when I was at Ball State as an undergrad, things were starkly different than they are now in that respect in terms of what the culture and the climate was for LGBTQ people, and to not just let that be word salad or this acronym that kind of half rhymes and rolls off the tongue, but lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, or questioning people as well. I think it's important to speak those names into existence because some of them are sort of the disappearing even in that people group, even in this population. Bi and trans people often get short shrift or are rendered invisible, so I think that's important to note. That's not the case now at Ball State, and for that I am hugely just joyful. I'm really happy. Things like the forthcoming Multicultural Center give me great hope for what is happening, because when I was an undergrad, there was not an LGBT, there was no Q center on campus. The other public universities in the state, Purdue, IU, so on, had those, and have had those sooner than we have had something like the Multicultural Center. But I'm really excited about this because when I was there, I did not have an edifice, I did not have a building to go to outside of, quite honestly, pursuing Ball State counseling services, which were wonderful. And I think I had a therapist during my undergrad years who was associate director of clinical psychology who partly saved my life because there were some dark times, there were some down times there. But I'm really excited about the path forward because what I experienced was a lot less inclusive. It was outright exclusive. There were so many people coming like me from small town Indiana who had not even had the nomenclature, had the verbiage of what is LGBTQ identity at the time. I was 17 before I knew what to call it on any level, let alone come out. And so that's really important. There were a lot of sheltered people, a lot of sheltered communities at that time, but as more and more people come out on that incremental level, the individual level, I think there is a big difference that can be made, and just the visibility given to that and to the other dimensions of difference within that as well. People who have different abilities or disabilities, or who are veterans, who are people of color who come out as well. Additionally, just, it's a beautiful just set of people across just a range of identities.
Right. And so you've been involved with Spectrum. It's a student organization that's been around a long time. Have you remained engaged with that organization, and do you take advantage of opportunities to support our current students?
You know, I would love to be more involved with Spectrum because I attended some of those meetings as an undergrad, and I'm glad that that organization is, I think, 1974 old. So it actually predates me joining the mortal coil, predates me on this earth. So that is encouraging because that was already at Ball State on some level, even if it was quieter when I was an undergrad, perhaps, than I feel it even is now. I see it on social media now, which social media, the advent of that, it was coming of age even as I was an undergrad, and moving from having a .edu address on Facebook to anyone being able to join Facebook. Those were very different times. The opportunity, I think, is to have LGBTQ alumni who come back, and even through something like the Cardinals Connect online system, mentor LGBTQ undergrad students, maybe match someone up with one who has a similar lived experience. It could be an African American or Black LGBTQ person with an undergrad who has that same identity. And I think there are just wonderful consistencies there in this very plugged in, even virtual world, that we can really make headway there and just connect people, whether it is in person or it is online, however they would communicate. And I would love to be part of that. We may have an LGBTQ affinity group among alumni that could be really good to have in the future. And some of the trappings of that, I think, are already being set.
Great, good. So Teresa, I'm going to come back to you. You mentioned in your first remarks the President's Advisory Council on Inclusive Excellence, an advisory group that I formed a couple years ago and invited you to join that group. Tell me what your experience has been like with PACE and what contributions that you've seen that group has made in just a relatively short period of time.
Okay. When you invited me, I wasn't a part of the faculty at that time, so I represented the community, actually, community impact. That's a committee I served on while serving on PACE, and the discussions and the talk about what can we do to make sure that there is community engagement, involvement, and not just a town and gown kind of scenario, but one that is genuine and one that should impact the community just as much as it impacts those at Ball State University. And so I have seen a lot of growth in these 2 years. Now, President Mearns was very serious about this because I was on a cruise at the time. I got off the cruise ship and I had all these calls. I'm thinking, who's calling me? Who's calling me? It was President Mearns. He was very serious about this. And so I better show up, and I was happy to do that. Certainly, in the short period of time, this committee has done a lot. I've seen the colleges across the campus and the deans all the way down to the staff and the students are really creating plans that involve inclusive excellence. It's very serious. I feel that. I hear the compassion in those who are on that committee talk about it, and the engagement on the committee is very good and very clear and very focused about where the PACE council should go, what it should be about, how it should influence and impact others. And so it's doing its job, and I'm certainly happy to serve on that committee.
Well, I'm grateful that you answered my calls, even from the cruise
I better
ship.
answer that call.
Right. Well, and we're going to talk with Marsha in just a minute, because Marsha has done some wonderful work
Yes.
leading that group and
Yes, she
ensuring
has.
that we're making progress. And we had a call recently where several of the deans reported on the progress in their college, and we'll give you a chance to share that, but they're making real measurable steps, very specific strategies and tactics spread out throughout the organization. So we'll come back to you in just a second, Marsha. But Renee, you were in leadership positions where often women were not necessarily common in those places, as a chief diversity officer and then a senior leadership position, several leadership positions in the energy business in places like Louisiana. Now you're the first woman to serve as the chair of the Board of Trustees here at Ball State, and we believe you're the first woman to serve as the chair of either IU, Purdue, or Ball State, so you're a trailblazer in that respect. You must have faced some obstacles, impediments. Tell us about how Ball State prepared you for that, or what lessons you learned from overcoming some of those obstacles.
Okay. It's always interesting to reflect on this, and I'd say some of them were real and some of them were self-imposed obstacles. I'd have to say my education prepared me in lots of ways. I have to say Burris was a very unusual education. I mean, we had a very different teaching skills, I think, that were presented to us, because a lot of our teachers were professors at the university at that time. So I was really brought up with the sense that there really wasn't anything I couldn't do. And I think a lot of that was my education at Burris from kindergarten through 12th grade. And then at Ball State, again, my professors, I think I was really instilled in me, you can do this, you can be successful. When I graduated in 81, 82 time period, and I had my first job, about 2 years after that I became pregnant with my son, and I already had my daughter at the time. And it was right after the Pregnancy Discrimination Act was passed in 1978, to where women couldn't be discriminated against in their pregnancies. And the company I worked for, the people management was very supportive of me being pregnant and having a child. However, the culture was that if a woman got pregnant, she quit, and your job was to stay home and take care of your children, and she didn't come back. And there were other women, a few women that were in management before me by a couple years, and nobody had had a child yet. And I wasn't going to quit. I was going to continue my working, and they were supportive of it. And after I had my son and came back to work, then other women started having children because they knew that they were not going to lose their jobs. That seems kind of foreign now, but that wasn't that long ago that was the environment. Well, as a result of that, even though they were supportive, you still had a culture of feeling like I should not let this ever be an issue. So it was very difficult to balance having children and working, and just feeling like I had to be there all the time. I could never show that I couldn't not work. And there were assumptions that, well, we can't ask Renee to do that because she's going to have to leave to go get her kids, or she can't travel because she has children. And there were assumptions made about my career based upon those assumptions, not perhaps realities. And I think as a result of that, I always felt like I had to work longer hours. I had to do more just to prove that that wasn't the case. Was that self-imposed or was that real? Was probably a little of both. The other piece I think that was probably more self-imposed was my reluctance to be out front. My personality is I'm a little more introverted than extroverted, and I'm much more comfortable being second chair, right? I was never necessarily wanted to be first. I'm a great backup to you. I can help you with all that. I just didn't always necessarily want to be the one in first chair. And that was my own self-confidence issue. And I had to push through that and work through that and know that I could do that and didn't have to be the person behind the scenes helping that person be successful. I still struggle with that at times, to be honest. I'm elected chair of the board. I was vice chair for 3 years. I great vice chair. But I know I can do this. I can be in the first chair. I was CEO of Hughes Utility for 10 years. Obviously, I can be first chair. But it's just a, I don't know if that's, culturally, I was in a world where, much like Teresa said, I was the only woman in the room for a lot of my career. So you adjust to message you get, or roles that people think you should assume, or how assertive your personality can be. So you're kind of always balancing that. And I still probably feel like I have to prove myself when I show up, even though I've had plenty of reasons to feel like I belong in the room, and that I'm able to use my voice. And I think that's probably one of the things I work on and think about a lot, that in the roles that I've been fortunate enough to have, it's my responsibility to use my voice and talk about like the things that we're talking about today. And it's important, and it's important that I use my voice.
And you and I have had conversations about leadership and how a person like you in a position of responsibility remains engaged with employees throughout the organization. You've told me about working directly with the linemen. Why don't you just share a little bit about how you maintained or at least developed those relationships?
Yeah, as I've said earlier, I can bore you to tears talking about the utility industry, but I love it. I mean, it really is an industry of service. I mean, everybody needs electricity, and nothing really happens if the lights aren't on. And the people that get your lights on, they're heroes. I mean, I love the front line and the linemen that are out there working with that. And as CEO of the utility, there was a whole lot of people's jobs it was to be filters from the front line up to me. And I knew that I wouldn't really necessarily know what their experience was if I didn't stay in touch with them. So I would ride with them. Once a month, I'd put on my boots and my hard hat and ride in the truck with them. It was just me. I would just show up as just Renee. There wasn't an entourage. They didn't necessarily know I was coming. And I would spend the day with them and see what their work was like. And I'd say, tell me, I've made a lot of decisions. How are they affecting you? And they would just be honest with me. Well, that wasn't such a great decision when you got rid of that safety tool because, and it was just a great rapport. And those were probably my best days. And it made me understand what their life was like. My life was very different in the role that I had, but I was making decisions every day that affected their life. And I needed to make sure I stayed in touch with it. And I respected them and the roles that they had.
So Jonathan, tell me about your professional experience. How has the culture been at Eli Lilly and in the other organizations that you work with?
Yes, the Pride Employee Resource Group, or ERG, at Lilly is quarter century young as of last year. Wonderfully, we hit Pride 25 in the same year that there was the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City, which really birthed the modern gay rights movement turned LGBTQ rights movement, which I will say also took a lot of learnings from the civil rights era and the civil rights movement in the LGBTQ movement. And now all of these are learning from each other and taking notes even in the current era we're in of some upheaval and seeking solidarity and equity. The Pride Employee Resource Group at Lilly is a 3-branch organization: corporate, U.S. field, a lot of field sales representatives and medical liaisons in the field, and then the international aspect of it as well, the other countries in which we operate, where we're seeking to make life better for people who need the medicines we create. And so the opportunity there is to have a widely disparate set of geographies, and with that comes a wide set of personhood, culture, leanings or ideas about what the identity is, and kind of a set of neutral, positive, negative stances that those communities may have where we operate. We start from a place of respect does not mean agreement, but respect for people is one of the 3 core values of Lilly, along with integrity and excellence. So people may start from a place of neutral to no, but then come to a place of yes. And that's what we seek to do, just fostering inclusion, building a global LGBTQ ally program as well, because those people who will be not latent allies, but overt, just action-oriented advocates are going to be the best for any population and the best for any community. And so we seek to foster that. We also have an LGBTQ employee journey that we're doing currently. We just rolled that out in October of 2020, and that is seeking to just build empathy and inclusion in the workplace for LGBTQ colleagues by sharing their lived experiences from both a numbers and narrative standpoint. Some people are gripped by data points and other people are gripped by story. As someone who graduated from Ball State's journalism school and the College of Communication, Information, and Media, I'm really taken by data storytelling, so kind of a fusion of the two. That's what grips or compels me, and so that's been really exciting from what we do at Lilly in the Pride organization, but also in the community organizations we work with. So organizations like the Damien Center and Indiana Youth Group and others that serve LGBTQ people and youth. There is BU Wellness that was born as Brothers United, which serves LGBTQ, African American and Black boys and men and people beyond that. A lot of these things have just become gender expansive in the time since they even originated, and our organization at Lilly definitely has done so as well. But it's been really exciting and just invigorating to see everything evolve organizationally inside our walls, but also with the organizations we serve and the ones that we partner with, because all of that matters, just the classic time, talent, treasure opportunity that is there to be helpful.
So Marsha, I want to bring you into the conversation now. You've been with us, I guess, about 18 months, joined us in May of 2019 after a very distinguished and high-impact career at Indiana University. And I've shared with others before, when I would tell people, business leaders or elected officials in the General Assembly, I said, you know, we've hired Marsha McGriff as our new Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence. And they'd say, how did you persuade Marsha McGriff to come to Ball State? And I'd say two things. One is, I didn't persuade her. She came because of the institution. And secondly, if you want to know the answer to that question, ask Marsha McGriff. So I'm going to ask Marsha McGriff, why did you leave the wonderful work that you were doing at IU to come here to join us at Ball State? What prompted you to make that decision?
It was a great opportunity. I had worked at IU for 20 years. And my last role, I was in the Office of the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs, and it was transformational. And you get that rare occasion in your career where you can go, I want to do that job. And so my little 6-year-old self said, what do I need to do to become that job? And so I studied under some great historical figures at IU, and my current supervisor at IU, and I became more refined. And so when the opportunity presented itself at Ball State, I took as like, oh my goodness, I wanted to stay in Indiana, and so I applied. And interestingly, Ball State was my first college tour. And so I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis, and that's the neighborhood, right? So I'm an inner city kid. I went to Arlington High School, and so I went on a college tour. I wasn't sure about college. And so I remember walking down the stairs. I had some little folder they gave us, and I took the little steps quite, at a time. I had seen the admissions presentation. I said, I'm going to go to college someday. I mean, it was like those moments of knowing, and it captured me. I was like, okay, so all right, let's do this. And so it happened at Ball State. And so I was able to connect. At my interview, I did it in the same building where I had this moment when I was 16 years old that I was going to go to college. And so it was this really weird conflagration of a whole lot of things, where it was the right time, the right place, and gosh, I'm glad I came.
So what has your experience been like? As I say, you've been here 18 months. You've made a lot of progress. We've talked a little bit about it. What has it been like to make that transition from an institution where you really must have felt very comfortable?
What attracted me to Ball State and really kind of binds me here is the beneficence pledge. That a public university would have an ethos that is so impactful about being kind and being considerate of others, is really important to me. I come from a Catholic background in terms of my education and just my spiritual background. And so I am very drawn to spaces that really hold true and want you to embody specific kinds of values. And Ball State had that for me. So it's not just work. You know, this is a treasure. This is a labor of love and a labor of the combination of data and story-driven work. And so I think for me, the experience has been the hardest work I've ever done in my whole life. I mean, it's like going home and lifting weights every day. I mean, you work very long weeks, but you know, you don't even feel it because you know that the work that you're doing is impactful, it's meaningful, and that it's spreading throughout the campus. We're doing exactly what I hoped that we would be doing in this particular position.
Right, and the work that you're doing, we announced, I think it was just in January, the first, our university's first Inclusive Excellence Plan, which is really about translating that pledge and those values into very specific strategies and tactics. It's a comprehensive plan, but why don't you share with us what you think are maybe the 3 most important strategies or goals in that new plan?
I think I would like to reflect first on why it's impactful. And one is, it's the fact that you have a plan, you know, aspirational and operational. And so if you look at the landscape of higher education, you know, some folks don't even have a plan. And so that was really important. It's like, okay, let's do this. We have a plan now. 2, the document itself is just a document, but what's embodied in it is collaboration. The spirit of collaboration is so important to inclusive excellence. You know, you can't do this work alone. You have to have collaborators. And so the collaboration of the President's Advisory Council for Inclusive Excellence, individuals from every part of our campus at multiple levels in our campus were critical to building that inclusive excellence plan and that inclusive excellence goal. And then 3rd, you know, inclusive excellence work has to start at the top, President Mearns. And so when I interviewed for the position, one of my recommenders called me. He said, hey, I got this call from Ball State. He's from Alabama, so you had to imagine the accent. He said, you know, the president considers himself the chief diversity officer. I was like, really? He says, that is phenomenal. And so President Mearns, I tell you, in terms of having the president of a university consider themselves the chief diversity officer is really important. And I have to count it amongst one of my most important leadership lessons and examples. And so having that leadership from the top has made this work, I think, much more impactful than it probably ever could have been. And so we have a phenomenal provost, we have deans, we have our department heads, we have our support unit heads, we have our phenomenal students and student leaders who have all begun to embody this work. Not just those goals, you know, in a document, but becoming a part of the spirit of what inclusion and what inclusive excellence is and should be, aspirational and operational.
Well, thank you for your kind words, and also thank you for joining us. We wouldn't be making the progress that we are making without you, so we're very fortunate to have you on our team. Thanks, Marsha. So, Teresa, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the Multicultural Center, but first I have to tell you a little story. First time I saw the existing Multicultural Center, I was surprised that it was located on the outskirts of campus in a, dare I say, modest structure. And so I decided that the next time I was going to see Renee Conley on campus, we had lunch in the village. And I said, Renee, come on, I want to take you on a walk. And so I took Renee over to the Multicultural Center, and I think she looked at it for about 90 seconds and said, I think we need to do better than this. So with Renee's support and the support of the board, we decided to invest $4 million to relocate and build a brand new Multicultural Center. And you were with us on the groundbreaking. That was in homecoming weekend. We did that quite deliberately at the board's suggestion. We scheduled the groundbreaking for the Multicultural Center at homecoming weekend, so not only would the university community be there, but the extended alumni community was there. You were able to join us. You had a chance to say a few words. Tell us what it means to transition that building and those programs from the outskirts of campus to the center of campus?
Back in the day, the Multicultural Center was called the Special Programs House. And I was a student at that time. I helped to set up that library in what's now the Multicultural Center, and called the Malcolm X Memorial Library. And so for that particular program, that house, now the Multicultural Center, to be located in the center of campus speaks volumes. I saw a lot of students go through there, and during that time, a lot of black students weren't able to live on campus. They had to live in Muncie or commuted from Indianapolis or Anderson or wherever they came from. And so at that time, the Special Programs House was their home away from home. I also was a student assistant in the Special Programs House at that time. I worked 10 hours a week, and helped me to have a little pocket change to, drive a car to campus and go back home. So that's a very special place for me. And didn't think, in terms of its location, that it was such a big deal. We were just happy just to have a place, right? But certainly, because of your leadership, and thank you to Renee and the trustees who decided, no, we can do better than this, and that this is a symbol of where we're striving to go in terms of diversity and excellence. In other words, you have put your mouth right in the center. Your action speaks louder, that has spoken louder than your words, and or equally as loud. And so it was a very, very important day to be a part of that groundbreaking ceremony. And again, another full circle moment for me. And to be able to help turn the dirt on that soil is very critical. Now, I don't have any grandchildren, but hopefully one day I do have grandchildren, and I'll be able to share with them that opportunity. A lot of people showed up. They were happy to be there, and I'm glad that it has expanded just from the Special Program House, which was primarily African Americans, to now a multicultural place for folks to gather. And it speaks volumes, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a part of the Ball State community, and that I was there when it happened. So thank you so much for your leadership in making that happen.
Well, and I think the benefit of the location, as you say, is both symbolic, but also we want that facility and the programs in that facility to be a resource for all of our students. And so by locating it there, we know it will be more accessible to a much wider array of our students. So, Jonathan, I know you're supportive about the new facility, but so I'm going to ask you to comment on that, but also ask you to look ahead. So our strategic plan sets a big stake in the ground for 2040, a long-term plan. What does inclusive excellence look like to you? What does success look like for Ball State University in terms of inclusive excellence in 2040? That's a big question.
It is. Thank you for it. As a former employee resource group chair, I enjoy casting vision. I enjoy the look ahead. Usually it's a 3 to 5 year plan and not 2 decades from now when I'll be closer to 60 as a vintage millennial.
It's great turning 60. Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Looking forward to it. As my great-grandmother would say back in the day from Evansville, Lord willing. But there is, with the Multicultural Center, which I will speak to first, there is such a dynamic opportunity with it being kind of the sort of midpoint on campus, as you said, from an accessibility standpoint. And as Teresa said, just the visibility that gives more to those who are doing all that walkthrough, the campus tours, versus being on the relative fringe. That's really important. And honestly, that relocation of the Multicultural Center was one reason why I gave great credence to the fact, besides that it's a great honor, that I would be nominated for and then join the Alumni Council of my alma mater, because it felt like not just an invitation or a line was being extended as if it was fishing season, but that I was going to be a welcome voice and an appreciated voice on the Alumni Council as another dimension of difference, just reflected in the Alumni Council lineup. So for that, I'm really thankful. And that was one of the catalysts for me wanting to join that organization and take on an additional role in that way. 20 years from now, so 2040, with the strategic plan and inclusive excellence, I think there are a lot of things that will change. You know, the Spectrum LGBTQ group that we've talked about earlier will continue to thrive, I would hope, and all the others that represent from alumni and undergrad perspectives, as well as those who are doing their graduate studies and may sort of feel like they're in the interim of life as well, that they're in a bit of an additional incubator period in life, that they will feel that there is just true inclusion on campus and in the Ball State community, whether that is online learning, whatever that looks like in 20 years. Because look at how virtual we're being even in this era of COVID in which we're abiding now, what the just collective community is withstanding. But that there will be a real verve for reaching out to people and seeing people for who they are and not saying things as have been said in the past and even said in my humble small town upbringing in the Midwest, you know, those who would say, I don't see color, or orientation doesn't matter to me, I don't see it, or gender, even within that gender identity that I don't see it, but that those things will be, no, I see that, I see your color, I see your identity, your gender, your dimensions of difference, and I readily embrace them, and that those things are all just celebrated, increasingly from what they already are today, but that those things would be celebrated, and that those would be, if it's long been said also, the truism of diversity is an invitation to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance, that to take that on a more serious side, and I love fun. I love parties and dancing. I mean, I am a fraternity man, but we have an opportunity to be able to say, you know, diversity is being invited to have a seat at the table, and inclusion is being passed that microphone. And I think that's part of what you're doing with the Inclusive Excellence Roundtables that are happening and the additional voices that I'm excited to see in the additional installments of that, the additional segments. But I think that is what's really important, that those voices are elevated. And that's something that can increasingly happen when there is equality and there's equity in the era of digital and social media, when just people can carve things out through a YouTube channel or a website or a personal or professional blog or their LinkedIn presence and build their own leadership, build their own thought leadership in those ways as well. And I think what that will look like in 20 years is anyone's guess, because all that just continues to evolve so much. And as one who works in digital and social media by day, just social and websites, I'm excited to see how that just burgeons additionally, and all these new layers continually come to that, and just how people are able to have their voices elevated and own it themselves. A lot of self-made thought leaders, besides those who are given voices from an organizational standpoint. So if we can just continue to elevate those in 2040, I'd be excited to be back in Muncie, you know, if I'm not beaming down from a starship or something, and talk about that. But it's just so different when we think about it. I mean, in undergrad, coming from late 90s, small town Indiana, to then Ball State in 2000, I joined at Ball State organizations, student orgs, from student media with the Daily News and Expo Magazine turned Ball Bearings now with that merger. I joined a fraternity, Alpha Tau Omega. I joined Campus Crusade for Christ. I was the son of a pastor, turned nursing home administrator, turned retiree in the era of COVID. And I joined Spectrum. I would go on Thursday nights from the 8 p.m. Spectrum meeting to the 9:30 Campus Crusade for Christ meeting with some so-called, or air quotes, disciples in tow, people I was ministering to before I was out myself as a person of faith who also identified as LGBTQ, as gay personally. And so I think those increasingly intersectional differences that we can just bring together will be crucial in 2040 like they are now.
Good. And we'll all get together again and we'll have a celebration to celebrate our ongoing success. So Renee, in January 2020, the same month that we released the new Inclusive Excellence Plan, the board also adopted a new unifying statement around freedom of expression. And we define inclusiveness as also embracing and respecting people with different ideas and different opinions. Why was that, and it had been, I think, since sometime in like the 1960s, since the university had adopted or amended the statement around freedom of expression. Why was that important to you and the other members of the Board of Trustees?
I think it was so important because as we pursue this excellence, you can't have that and not also have freedom of expression be part of that, and freedom of thought and freedom of ideas. And as we talk about inclusive excellence, it's inclusive, right? It's not picking and choosing, I want to be inclusive here, but I don't like your opinion or your idea, so you can't be included. And it really has to be thought broadly that everybody gets to participate, and we have to be able to create an environment so that everybody does feel that they can participate. And I mean, I think, you know, our role, hopefully, as a university, and as people come, as you say, you know, from many small town communities in Indiana, because 90% of our students are from Indiana, they come to Ball State, and maybe it's your first time you've ever had the experience of being around people with different backgrounds, different, you know, ethnic backgrounds, different thoughts. And I mean, I think part of you, hopefully, you challenge the beliefs that were given to you when you come to the university setting, and you explore these ideas and thoughts. And I like to think about it as it's just continuous learning, right? If you think about this, not that I have to go into this conversation of changing your thoughts, or I don't want to hear your thoughts. It's let me open my mind and listen to and understand it. I don't necessarily have to change how you're thinking or what you're doing, but I need to understand it, because so much of this is about building relationships and knowing each other as people, not what our stereotypes are or our preconceived notions are, and understanding why do you think that way and why are you doing it, and that's interesting. And really respecting that, and I think that's what we're all trying to do. I had an interesting, the other morning, in I was coming to this, kind of an antidote of how do you stop to think about what somebody's doing. And it had to do with my husband and I, and how we make coffee. And our sink and our coffee maker sits next to the sink, and depending upon who's there first makes the coffee. And I was making the coffee, and I go to the cabinet and I pull out a pitcher and I get in water to pour in the coffee maker, and he's like, well, you're doing that all wrong. The coffee maker's here, it's next to the sink. Why don't you just take the, you know, we have one of those pull down sprayers, and just put it and fill up the coffee maker. I see you do this all the time, and I don't know why you're taking this extra step to get this pitcher. And I said, well, I'm glad that you have stopped to say that I'm not doing it right, but you know, you're doing it differently. And I said, it's because I get the pitcher to fill the water because it reminds me I need to water the plants. So there was a whole nother reason why I was getting the pitcher versus just making the coffee. And I thought it just clicked in me that, well, that's kind of, I'm assuming that you're just doing it wrong because you're not doing it the way I'm doing it. But I had a different agenda that I was trying to solve versus just making coffee. I was watering the plants too. And I just thought that's kind of what we do a lot of times. We assume you're doing the same, you know, but you're thinking about it incorrectly, or you're doing it differently, versus me stopping to understand, well, how are you thinking about that, and why are you moving in a different direction than perhaps I thought about it. So I find it, if we can set aside our fears, which is I think a lot of gets invoked in people, and open your mind, it's just really a fun place to be, because I have always grown and become a better person as I've learned and had different experiences and made myself uncomfortable. I mean, these are not easy conversations to have, and to move into that area of discomfort and then grow and just see the other side. It's a great part of becoming a better person, I think.
And Marsha, because I asked you to serve as the vice chair of the committee that developed the recommendation to submit with the board, and that's because you didn't have much else to do, getting acclimated to the university and working on the Inclusive Excellence Plan. Was that a valuable learning experience for you? And if so, tell me why.
Absolutely. There were just so many elements that I didn't know. And I'm thinking, gosh, I'm like the diversity person here and I don't know these things. And so it triggered for us that we wanted to make a statement that was readable. Sometimes you can put a lot of legalese in things, and you want to make it so that people can understand it, adopt it, and wrap themselves around it. And then use opportunities to educate. You know, we can have a difference of opinion, but we don't have to hurt anyone. We don't have to hurt people's property. We need to figure out a way to help our young people in particular to engage in difficult conversations with their fully engaged, right? And give them the opportunities to learn the tools and techniques and frameworks, perhaps even, on how to have those conversations. And so I took it as an opportunity to learn for myself parts of the freedom of expression that I didn't know, but it triggered for me that I don't think just our students need to learn about how to be educated on how to have civil discourse around difficult conversations. But as you have noted, with so many different civil and social unrest happening, that our world, our community can really use a lot of education and development around how to have discourse around topics and ideals and ideologies that we don't necessarily agree with. So I learned a lot from that work.
So Marsha, I'm going to ask you a final question. I asked Jonathan, what does inclusive excellence look like in 2040 to Jonathan? Tell me what you hope, the work that you're doing with so many other people in the extended university community. What does success look like to you in 2040 at Ball State?
I think for me, I think it's important for us all to see ourselves as inclusive excellence. And so when I do the training, a lot of training, I have my participants touch their chest and say, I am inclusive excellence. Not that person over there or that thing over there. I am. I have to learn the tools. I have to build my own tool belt. I have to educate myself and educate others. And so once you have learned and engaged with this work, I would even say you have a bigger responsibility to share and to enlighten others about their role as inclusive excellence. And so I think that that's what I would hope, that everyone sees themselves as a part of this great and phenomenal work. I know that was kind of the 300,000-foot level, but I really do. And I think that will help to build empathy, to understand other people's journeys, and to understand and have respect for what people have gone through. You know, like in 2040, I hope that at that time, my grandson's not pulled over and doesn't have terror, you know, move through his body because he's a black man. I hope that, you know, a young woman will be a president of the United States. I hope that so many things will be a part of 20 years from now. But I really do hope that we find a space to understand racism and how hurtful it is and how devastating it is to a community. It's just so important. So for me personally, it's just important now we figure this out. And I hope we're not here 20 years from now asking the same questions, having the same issues over and over again. I just wish history would not repeat itself.
Thank you, Marsha. And Teresa, as Marsha said, this is work. This is work, and our work is not yet done. Tell me what you think we should be doing, what we should be continuing to do to reach the aspirational goal that we have.
What comes to mind is that golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated, right? That is so important. That, to me, is what I've tried to live my life by. If I don't want to be treated a certain way, don't treat others a certain way. Treat people like they matter, like they value, because they do. I think that the journey that Ball State is on in terms of this inclusion of excellence is very important and very critical, and that I think by 2040, that it will still be continuing because people evolve, situations evolve. Anything stagnant is pretty much dead, I would think. And so I would hope and think that the leadership in 2014 is continuing the mantle, if you were, and that it is important and it is critical because I think also it sets Ball State apart. And Ball State certainly to me is a leader in this. It's certainly shown, it's certainly talked about in my circles, and that it's very critical to continue this. I don't think, and this is a positive thing, that it will ever get to where we hope it would be, and that's a good thing because that means that we will continue to work at it, right? I think that's very critical. So hopefully that's what we find ourselves doing, and others that are in leadership roles all the way down to the students and the staff here at the university, is that this work will continue. Because sometimes when you drop the ball, certain things go by the wayside when we think things are better. I just think that Ball State will continue this journey, and it'll be a good thing.
So Renee, I'm going to give you the last word. So we had a board meeting on June 19th. Juneteenth is celebrated as a holiday, the ending of slavery here in the United States. You made a very personal statement on that day at the beginning of the board meeting. So I want to ask two questions. One is, why did you feel it was incumbent upon you as the board chair to make a statement on that particular day? And secondly, as we recognize there continue to be both on our campus and in our country things that divide us. What is our responsibility as a university community to prepare our students so that when they become graduates, they're the ones that are building the bridges, like your mother-in-law, Vivian Conley, building the bridges that bring us together?
Well, on that day, it was really important for me to recognize Juneteenth because I felt that, one, I think that there was tremendous civil unrest going on, and that it needed to be recognized. It needed to be spoken. I need to find my voice, so to speak, and raise the awareness that this is important and that the systemic racism exists, and that it was our role to make sure that we recognize it and that we do what we can to move things forward. And what we have is this opportunity with the students that come to us in this 4-year window to help them become strategic thinkers, to help them be problem solvers, to give them the tools to grow and develop and become better people in helping solve the problems. And I think we have a lot of tools that are here for them, whether it's immersive learning opportunities, whether it's working in the communities that we have reached out and have partnerships so well in the communities, whether it's organizations on campus that feel supported. Our role is to have our students that come here feel appreciated and that they feel part of it, no matter what your background is. You come here and you feel like you can excel and you can be the best that you can be, and that we help give you those tools to have these conversations and to be able to learn how to express yourself and have debate, but not be so angry about it and everybody go to their own corners and not figure out how do I bridge this, because we have to do this as people and as a country. We can only be better when we all work together. And whatever role that you're in, when you're out in the work role and leadership roles, it's about relationships. It's about bringing people together to solve a problem and to figure out what do we agree upon and figure out how do we make this work versus pointing out what we disagree about. And I think it's a whole lot more things that we all agree upon than the things that cause us to pull ourselves apart. And if we can provide our students these opportunities to help themselves grow and become strategic thinkers and problem solvers and critical thinkers, and have empathy for people with different backgrounds and different experiences. And again, see that as a way of just continuous learning, that I'm learning about how someone else thinks or what their life is like, and that helps me as a person. I can't necessarily experience it exactly what your life experience it is, but I can have empathy and understanding, and I don't deny your experience. I try to understand it. If we can give our students that, they'll be successful to help make this a better world. And they'll be the bridge that Vivian Conley talked about.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Renee, and thank you, Teresa and Marsha and Jonathan. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for joining us for this conversation. As Jonathan said during one of his remarks, this is the first of 4 conversations that we're going to have about our university's commitment to inclusive excellence. The next conversation will be moderated by our provost, Susanna Rivera-Mills. She'll be talking about how inclusive excellence is infused in our academic programs. She'll be talking with faculty and staff. Roanne Royer-Engel, who is our Vice President of Student Affairs, will host and moderate the 3rd conversation. We'll talk about how we engage our students in this work. And then I'll be back for the 4th conversation to talk about how the work that we do on our campus around inclusive excellence must also continue to strengthen the relationship with the communities that we serve. So that will be a more community-oriented conversation. So again, thank you all for joining me today, and thank you as well.